My name's Jake Foreman. I'm an illustrator from Adelaide, South Australia. I make a lot of work with grain and noise type texture through it. That works really well for screen printing and merchandise and that type of thing. Over the past couple of years, I've developed some actions that really helped me streamline my process and save a lot of time. And I feel like I've developed them to a point now where they're stripped back and would be great to sell and see some other people get some good use out of them. The actions will work great using Photoshop or Procreate. It doesn't really matter what app you've built your artwork in. It's just kind of the structure of the file that matters. And obviously you need to do the actual texturing itself in Photoshop at the very end. It's a good idea to watch this video through to the end if you're considering buying them or using them, just because it will help you get your head fully around how they work and complement each other. And yeah, there's some handy tips and tricks at the end on how I do my shading and how to turn fonts into a hand-drawn look at the click of a button. So yeah, let's get stuck into it. Alright, I'll just show you how to install the action files. You want to go to your downloads folder, unzip the file from my store, move these 3 action files onto your hard drive somewhere, and then in Photoshop, go to your actions panel. If that's not visible, just go Window Actions. And then on this menu in the Actions panel, go to Load Actions. Locate wherever you've saved them on your hard drive, select them all and press open, and then they should be in your actions panel ready to go. So while you're creating your artwork, you just want to make sure your lines, shading, colored shading, and flat colors are all on separate transparent layers. So if you go through my file here, you can just see the lines there are on their own separate transparent layer, shadings on its own separate transparent layer, same as the yellow highlights and orange shadows. The flat colors at the bottom here, they don't really matter as much if they're merged in some parts. I like to keep them separate so I can tweak the colors as I'm working. But the main thing you want is just any colored shading to be on a separate layer so you can run it through the stipple filter later. When you're ready to start texturing the file, you just want to make sure the image size is 3000 pixels wide, any height, and 300 pixels per inch resolution. If this scales up and there's any slight blurring or whatever around the edges, when we apply the actions, that'll all disappear. So the first action we'll be using here is the line bot action, and that basically applies a ink blotty hand-drawn style texture to outlines and text. The advantage to working like this, instead of choosing the perfect brush to make your artwork with, is that you don't get distracted by choosing the perfect brush to make your outline with. You can kind of know in the back of your head as you're working that you have another step in the process at the end that you can refine all your texturing to be perfect. The other advantage to working like this is that you're not limited by the file size. In apps like Procreate, they have a layer limit and you can't make any new layers when your file gets too big. So with this, you can work at a smaller document size and then know that you can blow it up as big as you need it to be in the last step here, which I'll run through later. So to use the line bot action, select the layer you'd like to apply it to, go back to the actions panel, and you'll see these 3 folders here. Open the line bot folder, and then it's basically split up into all different strengths of texture. So super will be quite bold and heavy, and then detail will be really fine. So I'm going to try regular first and hit play down here. I'll just turn off this shading layer too, so it's a bit less distracting. And you can see here, it's applied the texture all to the line work here. In my layers, it's duplicated an original copy of the line work here. So if I'm not happy with how bold this is, for example, I can just delete that layer, turn it back on, and then choose another one to try. So I might try light now, hit play. And that's working a little bit better for this one, I think. So yeah, if you need to try anything else, you've got your original layer here. And at the very end, if you wanted this outline to be purple or something, you can just hit the color overlay and then change it to whatever you need it to be. The next action I'll run through is the Stipple Bot action. So this one basically applies a bitmappy, dotty style effect to any smooth gradients that you've made in your artwork. The advantage to working like this is, again, while you're actually drawing, you're not worried about what the texture looks like. You know in the back of your head that you're going to treat that in the last step. And also the obvious one, you don't have to manually draw this texture yourself. It's going to save you a lot of time there. The first thing to do is select the shading layer you'd like to stipple. I've got mine here. Open your actions panel, open the Stipple Bot folder, and it's structured the same as the line bot action. So basically you've got small dots down here and big dots up here. So I'm going to try the semi-bold one first. And there you go, you can see it's applied that stipple texture all over it. This one's probably a bit too intense, so what I'll do is delete that layer that it's made, turn on my original, and try one a bit lighter. And this one's working a little bit better here, I think. To do the same thing for a colored layer, I'll do it on these yellow highlights here. You just want to make sure that before you run the action, you've made a black color overlay on the layer. And then same process again. I'm going to run the light one because that's what I used for the black. It's made it all stippled. And then at the very end, I can just change the color with the color overlay option here. Gonna just eyedrop the yellow that's from my work, and there we go. I'm gonna do that again to the orange shading on this layer, make it black, hit the action, change it with the color overlay. Sometimes with the Stipple Bot action, especially with the bigger dots, you can get little parts of black or color that don't quite run to the edge. The easiest way to fix that up is to just, if you're doing black, I'll make a new layer at the top and choose the pencil tool. Pencil tool's just got no kind of blurriness to it. It's a solid line, which is the same as what happens when you texture the artwork from the actions. So I just go in, and you can do this with a mouse or a Wacom tablet. I just manually draw in anything that's kind of annoying me around here. So the next thing I'll do is just go through and touch up any of those color layers that I applied the stipple texture to and get them all looking clean. So that's better to do it on the actual colored layer itself. So if I just see this orange layer here, I'll start going in and touching up anything in here, like these little bits. So now if I give you guys a zoom through, you can see I've touched up all of the little annoying bits, and the artwork's looking nice and clean. So the last action we're going to run it through here is the screen bot action, and that will take the work you've made so far using the other two actions and help you color separate it for screen printing. The other thing it's useful for is resizing the file. It'll make sure you can blow it up as big as you need it to be and keep clean, crisp edges. The other thing it makes easy is refining your color palette just that tiny bit more at the end without having to go through and manually select each color on different layers. They'll all be on one. So at this point, I'd save a copy of your file and just resize it if you need it any bigger to be the file size that you need it at now. I'm going to keep working with mine as it is. First thing to do is go to your actions panel and open the screen bot folder. Then click the setup document action. So what that's done is moved all the original artwork into this folder here, and created a background layer which will be useful for hiding that older artwork, which will make more sense later on. Now you can run the separate black action. Just press play down here. And if I turn on this background layer, you can see what it's done. It's just pulled out the black on its own layer from the original artwork. And it's also applied a small stroke to it here. What that does is just make sure that all those edges are crisp if you have resized the file. So to separate a colored layer, you just want to turn off your black and background layers and highlight your background layer. Then run the separate color action. Sample a color from your work that you'd like to separate. So I'm going to do this purple, and just make sure it's all selected solidly in this little preview down here. If you need to adjust this fuzziness slider a bit, you can, but usually 100's pretty good. When that's loaded, just go to your color overlay here and select the purple from your palette. And then in the stroke option here, just change that color to purple as well. Then you can turn on the background and just make sure that looks all right. So now I'm just going to do that for all the colors in my artwork. I'll run you through the next color as well. Just turn off that layer that you just did and turn off the background layer, and make sure you selected the background layer. Press separate color, select what color you'd like to separate. Change the color overlay from your palette and change the stroke color. I'm going to zoom through these next ones for you. So when you've separated each color, you can turn on this background and then turn on each layer and just make sure they're all correct. You can see here I forgot to change the stroke on the green, so I'm just going to fix that. So one thing that isn't quite working now is that because we have a stroke on this red color and it's not covered by any black, it's making an inconsistent thick dot here when you can see these ones are a lot thinner. So a handy trick to get rid of that is just duplicate that red layer, turn off the stroke on the bottom one, and then rasterize the layer style. Then what you want to do is just get the eraser tool and erase from anywhere where that is not looking quite right. You want to avoid going over the black too, or else you're going to lose the stroke that's kind of giving you a nice edge going up towards the black. Once you've cleaned that all up, just merge those two layers together. One last check you can do just to make sure everything's separated out properly is go to your black layer and change the opacity settings to multiply and run it at about 30%. Then you can just zoom in and see that everything has a little bit of overprint allowed for it. And that'll basically just mean that when it's screen printed, there's less chance of getting that white line from where the colors don't line up. When you're happy with everything, just rasterize all those layer styles, because sometimes the strokes on the layers can start to slow down your computer. You can also do that as you're going through and color separating each layer. If your computer starts lagging or whatever, just hit rasterize layer style as you're going through, and that'll help it speed up a bit. So now you can see we've got each color here clearly on its own layer. And if we want to change the colors slightly, we can just add a color overlay and slightly tweak that however we might need to. And it's all easy in one layer. So a handy trick to do all your shading with the airbrush brushes is to just grab the magic wand tool up here and use your outline to select whatever area you want to work in. and just brush it in nice and easy with the airbrush tool. You can get really long fades too if you need to. So if I was doing this hand here, I can do a really big one, and then just scale my brush size as well as I'm working to get some of the harsher lines in here. If your area that you want to shade isn't housed by line work, you can use the lasso tool, which is up here. And then you just have to manually select the shape you want to use, like that. Grab your airbrush again, and then you can go up against the line. The process is the same in Procreate. You just use the airbrush tools and selection tools in that program. One handy trick is to make your outline layer a reference layer, and that means that if you have your shading layer selected, you don't have to toggle to your outline layer to select the area you want to shade. It will always use your outline layer as its point of reference for the selection tool. Another tip is if you want to combine some texture strengths, so let's say for example you want this type in here to be a different color or a different level of harshness of texture, you can just go through and select that and cut it out from that layer and paste it on a new one. So now if I texture my outline with the line bot, I can then make sure this is maybe finer so it doesn't distort the text as much. And then that frees you up to also make it a different color if that's what you're looking for. An easy way to make fonts look hand-drawn is just to make sure that's on its own separate layer and run that through the line bot. I might do, say, black, get it really, really bold. Then I'll change the color to blue so we can see what we're doing. If I command click on that layer, it'll select everything. Then go to paths. And this button here will create a path from that selection. Then on a new layer, you want to make sure you've got a brush that's similar to your outline selected. I'm going to use the pencil tool. Then use this path selection tool here and go stroke path. Select either the brush or the pencil. I'm going to use the pencil and press OK. And then in your paths, turn that path off and you can see there it's just outlined the layer. So to get this little break between the arrows and the shading so it stands out, I basically had those elements on a separate layer, and then I command clicked that layer, went select, modify, expand, added some space around that, and then I deleted it from the shading layers. So I'll delete it from this layer and this layer and this layer, and you can see that's taken it all out. If I wanted it to not be a harsh edge and a bit kind of blurred out instead of a harsh line, I just go select, modify, feather, and you can make that as soft as you want. So if I do 10 pixels, you can see now it's just got a nice soft edge around it. And then you basically apply your actions and textures to it from here on out. So my last trick here is using grays in your shading instead of solid blacks to get this kind of texture all the way through the shading instead of something like this here where it goes into harsh black. All you do is paint those layers on a separate layer. So you can see here my mirror shading is at an opacity of 63. I can make that lighter if I wanted to, or heavier. And same as my clouds, they're a bit lighter, whereas this shading here on the face is all 100% black. So by doing that, you can experiment and get different levels of texture in those areas as you need to. So that's it. Hopefully you're getting some good use out of that tutorial and the actions in your own work. If you have any further questions, just put them in the comments and I'll answer everyone as best I can. If you have any work that you're super proud of, feel free to post it on Instagram and tag me. I'll go through and check it all out and maybe reshare some of the work on my own Instagram page. Thank you very much.